Montana, 1874. The gunshot was a crack in the frozen heart of the night. Miles Abernathy's eyes snapped open. He'd spent 17 years in the wilderness, and he knew the difference between the sound of a falling branch and the sound of a man in trouble. He lay still, listening. There it was again. Another shot. Faint, but desperate. He rose from his bed, the cold floorboards biting at his bare feet. At 57, the winter had a way of getting into his bones. He lit a lantern, the glow carving a face out of the darkness. It was a face weathered by solitude, lined with a grief he never spoke of. He moved to the window, wiping away the frost. Outside, snow was falling, thick and silent, burying the world in white. No one should be this far up the mountain, not in February. He dressed quickly. Wool, buckskin, and the heavy weight of his rifle. He stepped onto the porch, the cold a punch to the lungs. And that's when he saw it. Dark spots on a perfect white canvas. Blood. Miles hesitated. For 17 years, he'd minded his own business. The world could burn, as long as the fire didn't reach his cabin. But something about that blood on the snow. It pulled at a part of him he thought was long dead. He followed the trail. It led him down the mountain, toward the flickering lights of Pinewood, the only town for a 2-day ride. The blood trail grew heavier, a grim path through the pines. Just before the tree line he found him. A man face down in the snow, a dark pool spreading out from under him. Miles knelt. He turned the body over. A stranger, a city man by the looks of his coat. Spectacles still perched on his nose. Miles searched his pockets. A wallet, Dr. Edmund Clark, Chicago, and a folded letter stained with blood. Miles squinted in the dim light. Must return with the girl immediately, it read. Red-haired child is key to everything. SR will not wait longer. Miles pocketed the letter and walked toward the trading post. The door creaked open. June Sawyer, the owner, stood behind the counter, her silver hair pulled back tight. She was maybe the only person in the world Miles considered a friend. "Heard the shots," she said, her voice dry as dust. "Figured you'd be the one crazy enough to check." "Found a dead man," Miles said, his own voice rough from disuse. "City fellow, Dr. Clark." June's face darkened. "He arrived yesterday. He was waiting for you." "For me?" "Not you specifically," she corrected. "For help." She nodded toward the back room. "You better come see for yourself." Miles followed her past shelves of flour and furs to a small storeroom. She unlocked the door and stepped aside. At first all he saw were crates and barrels. Then he saw her. A small figure, huddled in the corner. A child. Maybe 7 or 8 years old, with a wild tangle of fiery red hair. She was sitting in a crude wooden wheelchair, her thin legs hidden by a ragged blanket. Her eyes, a startling clear blue, stared right through him. No fear, no curiosity, nothing. It was like looking at a beautiful, empty doll. "Found her 3 days ago," June said quietly. "Man named Silas Reed left her here. Said he'd be back. I knew he was lying. Silas Reed, the initials on the letter. SR. "Dr. Clark showed up yesterday," June went on. "Said he was looking for a red-haired girl. Was going to take her somewhere safe, but—" She didn't need to finish. The doctor's body was lying in the snow, a testament to his failure. Miles couldn't move. He just stared at the child. Something about her vacant eyes, the fragile set of her shoulders, it was a ghost of a memory he'd spent 17 years trying to bury. "She doesn't speak," June said. "Barely eats. Sheriff Cooper says it's not his problem. Says she'd be better off in an orphanage come spring." June looked him dead in the eye. "That's a death sentence for a crippled girl, and we both know it." Miles felt the unspoken question hanging in the air. He took a step back, shaking his head. "June, I can't." "You're the only one I can ask," she cut in. "You've got the space. You've got—" She hesitated. "I've got what?" Miles challenged, his voice hard. "You're a good man, Miles, despite how hard you try to forget it." He closed his eyes. The memories came rushing back. A Boston townhouse, music, laughter, his wife Margaret at the piano, his daughter Victoria dancing with ribbons in her hair, then fire, screams, the smell of smoke, the telegram that came too late. He opened his eyes and looked at the red-haired child. Taking her in meant breaking 17 years of solitude. It meant caring about something again, and caring was a weakness he couldn't afford. He sighed, a long, ragged breath that surrendered to a fight he hadn't even started. He was already lost. "I'll need supplies," he said, his voice a low growl, "and help getting that chair up the mountain." June's face softened with relief. As she gathered supplies, Miles noticed the doctor's leather satchel. He opened it. A notebook, medical tools, and a newspaper clipping about missing children in Chicago. He took the notebook. Maybe it held an answer to the question that was already burning in his mind. Who was this girl? And why was a man dead in the snow because of her? Dawn was a gray smear across the sky by the time they were ready. Miles had rigged June's sled to carry the wheelchair. As he was strapping it down, Sheriff Cooper rode up, a heavy-set man with a badge that looked too small for his chest. "Heard about the doctor," Cooper said, his eyes flicking between Miles and the girl. "I see you're taking our little visitor. You planning on stopping me?" Cooper shook his head. "No, but I should warn you. That child came in with Silas Reed. You know his reputation." Miles knew the stories. Smuggling, extortion, worse. "Reed doesn't let go of what he considers his," Cooper continued, "and he was mighty interested in that girl. Watch your back, Abernathy. Reed's got friends in places you wouldn't expect." He looked right at the girl. "And enemies who'd kill for whatever secret she's carrying." The journey back was a slow, brutal climb. The girl remained silent, her blue eyes taking everything in with that same unnerving stillness. By mid-afternoon, they stopped by a frozen stream. Miles offered her jerky. She took it but didn't eat until he took the first bite, a creature trained in caution. As they sat there, she started humming, a faint, haunting melody, a lullaby. It was there for a moment, a flicker of life in the emptiness, and then it was gone. Her face was a blank mask again. They reached the cabin as dusk fell. Miles got her inside, the chair barely fitting through the door. The cabin was one large room, a fireplace, a table, shelves of books from a life he'd left behind. The girl's eyes moved over everything, the traps, the pelts on the wall. Then her gaze locked onto a corner, and she went perfectly still. Miles followed her look. There, gathering dust, was his violin case. He hadn't touched it in 17 years, not since the fire. The intensity of her stare made him uncomfortable. He busied himself with the fire, making a bed for her near the hearth. Later that night, long after she'd fallen asleep, Miles lay awake. Her presence had filled the silence of his home, and he wasn't sure he liked it. He got up and opened the doctor's notebook. Notes on children with unusual abilities. Experiments. A mention of a Sullivan girl with extraordinary eidetic recall. A whimper from the hearth. The girl was tossing in her sleep, her face twisted in a nightmare. Her eyes flew open, darting around the room in panic. They locked on him. Then they shifted to the violin case. Against his better judgment, he brought it to the table. His hands trembled as he undid the latches. Inside, the violin gleamed in the firelight, untouched by time. He lifted it to his shoulder. The familiar weight was a ghost against his skin. He drew the bow across the strings. A single pure note filled the cabin, cutting through 17 years of silence. He closed his eyes, the vibration running through him. When he opened them, the girl's expression was transformed. The emptiness was gone. In its place was a hunger, a desperate need that was almost painful to see. She was leaning toward the music as if it were a fire, and she was freezing. He played. A simple melody at first, then a piece by Bach, his stiff fingers slowly remembering the language they once spoke so fluently. When he finished, the silence rang with echoes. The girl was sitting upright, her eyes shining with tears. "Please," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse, "play more." Something inside Miles cracked. A wall he'd spent 17 years building crumbled into dust. He raised the violin again and began to play a lullaby, the one Margaret had written for their daughter, Victoria. As the last notes faded, the girl spoke. "My name is Ruby," she said. Miles nodded, his throat too tight for words. "I'm Miles." "I know," she replied. "The doctor told me about you. He said you would help me." And just like that, Miles Abernathy, the man who ran from the world, found himself standing guard over a child who had brought music back from the dead. But as he looked at her sleeping form, a new, cold thought crept in. The doctor hadn't just known his location, he had known his history. This wasn't a random meeting, this was a reckoning. And it had followed him all the way to the top of this lonely mountain. The days settled into a quiet routine. Miles built a ramp for Ruby's wheelchair. He lowered shelves. He turned his fortress of solitude into a home. Ruby rarely spoke, but her eyes missed nothing. She watched him, cataloged his movements, learned the rhythm of his life. And every evening, he played the violin. She would listen, her concentration absolute. She could hum back any melody after hearing it just once. Her memory was perfect. One morning, Miles was outside chopping wood when he heard it. Music. From inside the cabin. He crept to the window. Ruby was sitting in her wheelchair, the violin held awkwardly, but she was playing. She was playing the Bach piece from that first night, note for perfect note. He'd never taught her. He'd never even shown her how to hold the bow. He stepped inside. She stopped immediately, guilt flashing across her face. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to put the violin away. "No," he said, crossing to her. "You play beautifully. You have a gift, Ruby." A flicker of pride. Then it was gone, replaced by weariness. He said that too, that I was special. "Who? Dr. Clark?" She nodded. "And the other one, the man with the black glove." A chill went down Miles's spine. "Silas Reed." Ruby flinched at the name. "He gets angry. He hurt the doctor. He'll hurt you too if he finds me." "No one is going to hurt you," Miles said, a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. That afternoon, he examined her wheelchair. It was a crude, cruel thing. He spent hours smoothing the wood, balancing the wheels, making it comfortable. As he worked, she watched him. "The doctor told me all about you," she said suddenly. "That you played violin in Boston." Miles stopped working. "What else did he tell you?" "He said you would understand, that you would help, because you knew what it was like to lose something important." The words hit him like a physical blow. How could Clark have possibly known about Victoria and Margaret? "Ruby," he said, his voice urgent. "You're home. Before Silas Reed. Do you remember it?" A shadow crossed her face. A big house. A piano. A woman singing. I think it was my mother." That night, Miles went back to the doctor's notebook. He found a reference to the Sullivan case. A wealthy Chicago family's daughter kidnapped 3 years ago. A girl described as having remarkable auditory recall. Ruby Sullivan. It had to be her. But why bring her to Montana? He found another entry. Notes on experiments, conditioning techniques to enhance memory. It made his blood run cold. Then, a newspaper clipping. Dr. Oscar Whitman, a Boston physician, pioneering musical therapy for traumatized children. The date on the article was 1857, the year of the fire, the year he lost everything. Suddenly, a branch snapped outside. Miles moved to the window, rifle in hand. He scanned the moonlit clearing. Nothing, but the hairs on his neck stood on end. He wasn't just being paranoid, they were being watched. The next morning, he found the tracks. Multiple sets circling the cabin. When he got back, Ruby was waiting, the violin in her lap. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked. Miles didn't answer. He showed her the hidden cellar beneath the floorboards. "If I tell you to hide, this is where you go. You stay quiet, no matter what." She nodded solemnly. "Like the shed at Mr. Reed's place. When the bad men came, he locked me in the shed." The casual cruelty of it lit a fire in Miles's gut. "No," he said, his voice thick. "This is to keep you safe, and I will always come back for you." He had to know what was coming. He left Ruby, barred in the cabin, and rode down to Pinewood. June confirmed his fears. Reed had been through, asking questions, with a crew of rough-looking men. The threat was real, but then came the twist. As Miles was about to leave, Sheriff Cooper walked in. And he wasn't alone. He was with a well-dressed stranger, also asking about a missing girl. June grabbed his arm. "Wait, something's not right. Cooper's too friendly with him." The stranger handed Cooper a telegram. The sheriff nodded, deferential. It was a look Miles didn't like. Cooper wasn't just the law. He was working for someone. Miles raced back to the cabin, his heart pounding. The chimney was dark. The fire was out. He burst through the door. The cabin was empty. Ruby was gone. The violin lay on the floor as if dropped in a struggle. Miles's blood ran cold. He searched the tiny space, calling her name. He checked the cellar. Empty. Then he saw it. The back window unlatched. They had taken her. They had known exactly where to look. He was grabbing his rifle when the door creaked open. He spun around, weapon raised. It was Ruby, bundled against the cold, her face flushed. "Miles, I saw him," she whispered, her voice urgent. "The man with the black glove. He was watching the cabin." She hadn't been taken. She had escaped. While he was gone, she'd seen Reed in the trees. Fearing he'd find the cellar, she'd slipped out the back and hidden in a hollow log. She'd watched Reed meet with another man, Sheriff Cooper. She'd overheard them. "Tomorrow night," Cooper had said, "and the girl is worth more alive." It wasn't a rescue. It was a transaction, and it was happening tomorrow. The sheriff was corrupt. They were trapped. They had to run. As Miles packed, his hand brushed an old wooden box under his bed. A box of ghosts, Margaret's locket, a dried flower from Victoria, and his father's old pocket watch. He ran his thumb over the engraving. William Abernathy, M.D., a doctor in Boston, dead for 30 years. The name in the doctor's notebook. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Where will we go?" Ruby asked, her voice trembling. Miles knew a line cabin, miles north, a place no one would think to look. As they prepared to leave, Ruby pointed to another box, Margaret's jewelry box. He opened it. A pearl necklace, her wedding ring, and at the bottom, a folded piece of sheet music. Victoria's Lullaby, written in his wife's hand. Ruby studied the notes. Then she began to hum, a perfect note-for-note rendition of a song she had never heard. "How did you do that?" Miles gasped. "I can see the music," she said simply. "In my head, like pictures." That was it. That was her gift. The reason Reed wanted her. The reason Clark had died for her. Her mind was a key, a weapon, and Miles was the only one who could protect her. He carried her on his back into the frozen night, the ghosts of his past and the dangers of his present swirling around them in the falling snow. The line cabin was a single room against the wilderness. They made it there by midnight, exhausted but safe for now. As Ruby slept, Miles kept watch, the doctor's notebook open. The Abernathy connection remains our best hope. What connection? He had run from his name, his past, for 17 years. How had it found him here? In the dead of night, he heard it. Footsteps in the snow. Too many to be an animal. He woke Ruby, hissing for her to hide in the cellar beneath the hearth. The knock on the door was soft. "Abernathy. It's Cooper. I'm alone." Miles held his rifle steady. "Give me one reason not to shoot you where you stand." "Because I'm not working with Reed." Cooper's voice came through the door. "I'm working against him." Miles let him in. Cooper was holding a document. Authorization from the federal marshals. He was undercover, trying to bring down Reed's entire operation. An organization they called the Black Glove. "They don't just smuggle goods," Cooper explained. "They deal in children, special children, ones with talents. They sell them to powerful men, researchers, collectors." "People buy children?" Ruby asked from her hiding spot. She'd been listening. "Bad people do. Cooper said grimly. And Reed is their top supplier. He then dropped the next bombshell. A man had arrived in Pinewood, an old doctor from Boston named Oscar Whitman. He was looking for Dr. Clark and for Miles Abernathy. Whitman, the name from the newspaper clipping in Clark's satchel, the man Margaret had mentioned all those years ago. The kind man, Dr. Clark, he told me about him, Ruby said, emerging from the cellar. He showed me music with hidden messages, names of important men who work with Mr. Reed. Cooper leaned forward. What names, Ruby? Ruby's eyes darted to the sheriff, a senator, a judge, and a marshal named Hollister. Cooper's face went pale. James Hollister, the U.S. Marshal for the entire Montana Territory. The corruption went to the very top. This changes everything, Cooper said. We can't trust anyone. He looked at Ruby. Any other names, child? Ruby closed her eyes, concentrating. Another doctor. Someone who worked with children like me. His name was in the music, too. She opened her eyes and looked right at Miles. Abernathy, Dr. William Abernathy, from Boston. The room spun. William Abernathy was his father, a man dead for over 30 years. How was this possible? The doctor said sometimes secrets stay hidden for generations, Ruby whispered. That's why the music was important. It keeps secrets safe until the right person can hear them. She then revealed the most shocking twist of all. He said your wife could see the music too, Ruby said. That she helped your father make the code. It was impossible. His father had died years before he ever met Margaret. Unless it wasn't a coincidence. Just then, the sound of barking hounds cut through the air. Reed's men, they were close. We have to split up, Miles said instantly. Cooper, take Ruby to the river. The water will mask her scent. I'll lead them east with Whitman. He knelt before Ruby. Do exactly what he says. I will find you. I promise. He pulled her into a fierce hug, then watched as Cooper carried her away into the forest. He and Whitman took off in the opposite direction, leaving a clear trail for the hounds to follow. The chase was brutal. Gunshots echoed through the pines. They scrambled over a rocky ridge, trying to lose the trail. As they ran, Whitman filled in the rest. Miles's father and Whitman had discovered a rare ability they called harmonic perception, the ability to see music as language, an ability that was hereditary. Margaret hadn't just been a music student, she had been their most gifted subject. After his father was murdered for threatening to expose the project, Margaret had changed her name and fled, eventually, and coincidentally, marrying the son of the man who had started it all. The fire that killed her and Victoria? Whitman had always suspected it wasn't an accident. Margaret had been about to expose the black glove herself. They were cornered in an old trapper's cabin. Reed and his men surrounded them. Give me the girl, Abernathy, Reed yelled, and you walk away. As Reed's men doused the cabin in kerosene, Miles shoved Whitman down a hidden trapdoor. Go! Get to June's! The cabin went up in a roar of flames. Miles escaped through a narrow tunnel emerging into the woods behind Reed's men. He had a clear shot. He could end it right there. But he couldn't. He couldn't become a killer. He slipped away into the darkness, the fire at his back, and ran. He reached June's trading post at dawn. Whitman was there, safe, but Ruby was not. Hollister came, June said, her face grim. The U.S. Marshal. He had papers. Said he was taking her into protective custody. Cooper had tried to stop him. Hollister had shot him dead. Miles felt the world give way. They had lost. But as June spoke, she held something out. A small, carved wooden chess piece. A knight. Ruby had left it behind. Carved into the bottom were 3 letters. HLN. Helena. She was telling him where they were taking her. June smuggled them to Helena in the false bottom of her supply wagon. With Cooper's key, they opened his safety deposit box. Inside was a mountain of evidence against the black glove. Letters, ledgers, names. It was enough to bring them all down. They took the evidence to a federal judge who was in town. He was shocked, and he immediately issued a summons for Hollister to bring Ruby to his courtroom the next morning. The next day, the courtroom was packed. Hollister stood before the judge, arrogant and calm. Your Honor, he said smoothly. The child was transferred to federal authorities from Chicago early this morning. She is no longer in my custody. It was a lie. They were too late. Miles's heart sank. But just then, the courtroom doors swung open. A man strode in, flanked by two officers, and between them, on a pair of new crutches, was Ruby. "Your Honor," the man said, "I am Daniel Sullivan of Chicago. This is my daughter." Ruby's father. He had never stopped looking. He'd arrived just in time to stop Hollister from spiriting her away. Ruby saw Miles. "Miles!" she cried, hobbling toward him as fast as she could. He swept her up in his arms, holding her tight, the entire courtroom watching in stunned silence. The rest was a blur. Hollister was arrested. The evidence was sent to Washington. The black glove was finished. That afternoon, at the train station, Miles had to say goodbye. Ruby was going home, back to a life of comfort and safety in Chicago. "Will you be all alone in the mountains again?" she asked, her lower lip trembling. "I won't be alone," he said, his own voice thick. "Not anymore. I'll have memories of you, of the music." He promised to write. She promised to practice her violin. He watched the train pull away, a small red-haired girl waving from the window until she was gone. A week later, Miles was back in his cabin, packing a bag. He wasn't staying. He was going to Boston. There were still questions to answer about his father, about Margaret. As he was clearing out a space beneath the floorboards, his fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound journal he'd never seen before. He opened it. The handwriting was Margaret's, May 15th, 1857. "William believed we could help children with our work. I must continue what he started. But they are watching me now. If anything happens, I've hidden copies of our research. The lullaby contains the first key." She had known. She had known she was in danger. She had hidden her work, her secrets, right here, in his own past. Miles closed the journal and put it in his pack. Ruby's story had a happy ending, but he now realized his was just beginning. He slung his pack over his shoulder, picked up his violin case, and walked out of the cabin for the last time. The trail led down the mountain, away from 17 years of silence, and toward a world of answers. He didn't know what he would find, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. He had a purpose, and he had a melody in his heart. A lullaby transformed from a song of loss into a key, a beginning, a promise. If this story of a man who found his way back from the brink of despair moved you, let us know in the comments below. What do you think Miles will discover in Boston? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of the untamed frontier, where justice is hard won and the human spirit is the only thing tougher than the wilderness itself. Thanks for listening.